We're now in the month of Elul, the Hebrew month of Elul, approaching Rosh Hashana. And in Elul, on the 12th of Elul, back in the English calendar in 1998, my brother, Jonathan Mann, Dr. Jonathan Mann, he was aboard Swiss Air Flight 101, flying from New York to Geneva. And he was actually a very well-known, world-famous public health doctor, battling the AIDS epidemic, and he was very, very well-known and very beloved. And anyway, that plane crashed on the 12th of Elul that year, killing everybody aboard. And that, of course, affected myself and many, many people who knew him, and of course the other people on board right before Rosh Hashanah. And so I'd like it to be that this little Dvar Torah should be a La'ili Nishmaso. It should be an elevation for his soul, and hopefully it will give us all a little some sweet inspiration for the coming year. The historic epoch that we live in now is really completely unique. It's called, in the words of our sages, Iksu de Mashiach, the final chapter of exile. We are now, and how do we know we're in the final chapter of exile? How do we know that? So the sages in the Talmud and the Midrashim and even in the prophets, they put for us thousands of years ago many very specific signs that the Iksu de Mashiach, that the final chapter of exile will have arrived, when all of these signs and all their specificity have actually come to pass. So already in the last generation, the luminaries of the last generation are the Chafetz Chaim, Rochana Masman, Zecher Tzadikim Evrocha, and others went through poured through the Talmud and the Midrashim and so forth, and declared that all of the signs have been fulfilled. Not one is missing. They're all there, and they're all things that all together as a picture could never have been foreseen thousands of years ago by anybody. Things touching on the way the economic life is today, things touching on the way the emotional mood of people, on the morality or lack thereof, and all kinds of things. The way we're living, things that happened in Israel, things that happened not in Israel. Without going into them, they've all been fulfilled. So we live now in that unique epoch in history. So the question is, how does that affect our Elul? How does that affect the way that we now approach Rosh Hashanah today? So we know that there's a question as we Elul, we examine ourselves, we introspect, we try to do what's called cheshbon nefesh, an accounting of the soul, in order that we come into the new year with already an understanding of ourselves and all of our God-given abilities and talents, and that hopefully we can use, activate, and realize more of our potential to come closer to Hashem and to help Klal Yisrael. As most famously was said, that in these days, as we come close to the end of the final chapter, to be followed by the Yemos Mashiach, that the students thousands of years ago asked Rabbi Eliezer Agadol, the rabbi of Rabbi Akiva, they asked him, what will a person do in those days? Life will be so challenging, and there'll be so many upheavals in the world. What is the person supposed to do? So he said, Ya'asok b'raisa u'gemilas chasadim. What we have to do is occupy ourselves, immerse ourselves in Torah and in doing acts of chesed, of loving kindness. So, at any rate, so how do we see ourselves coming into Elul? So we look at ourselves and we think, well, what do I do? I'm just one person, or I'm with a group, but compared to what I read of our Torah giants that were, what can I really do? But the Arizal, who lived in 16th century Tzfat, the Arizal, and he lived a short life, but he was like a spiritual lightning to the Jewish people. He lit up the whole Jewish Torah panorama then and for us until today. And he said that as great as he was, and his Talmud, Rav Chaim Vital, he said if they had been alive during previous generations, when during previous generations, when the forces of tuma, of spiritual negativity, of spiritual cacophony, as I like to say, were not as prevalent. The world has changed. The world, now that we're in this last chapter, the last epic of history before Yemos Mashiach, so the tuma, the spiritual cacophony, the spiritual pollution is entrenched in the world and very, very powerful. It's called klipos, or shells, in the language of the Arizal. So that means that if those opposing forces, so to speak, were removed, were taken out of the picture, we would appear very different. And the Arizal teaches us that this is in fact how we should see ourselves. We should see ourselves not that our actions are just, are small and are maybe somewhat ineffectual, or how they're really inconsequential. No, not at all. He says that no, our actions are seen not the way we look at it, but as they're seen in the Shemayim from up above. They're seen in a much broader perspective, taking away the specific circumstances of history where we now stand, and therefore even a what seems to us to be a small mitzvah, or just a few more words of Torah, or a small act of kindness to somebody else, is going against tremendous forces, and therefore it's really a wonderful thing and a great thing. As we know, all the Torah and all the mitzvahs have eternal energy, so they go on, they're everlasting. So in Yirtzeh Hashem, hopefully we can see this, realize this, and then have more energy and more life and more deep feeling in everything that we do as we come to Rosh Hashana, so that we can really experience it fully, live it, and be full of all the most powerful energies of our spirit, which is Ahava and Yira, which is love and fear. And we can approach Rosh Hashanah with all of those energies, and therefore all, again, be sealed and inscribed for a wonderful new year for all of Klal Yisrael, all the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael and throughout the world.